A black candle burns on a desk beside two unsigned papers. One paper leads to the life everyone expects. The other leads to the life no one understands. The person sitting there believes the decision is between safety and risk, approval and uncertainty, logic and madness. But the candle keeps bending toward one page and away from the other. Not because the paper is cursed, because the body already knows what the mind is still negotiating. Before every major decision, a hidden warning appears somewhere in the room of your awareness. The tragedy is not that the warning is hard to see. The tragedy is that most people are trained to ignore everything that does not arrive as logic. There is a belief so deeply installed in the architecture of modern thinking that most people never question it. The belief is this: that a good decision is one made with enough information, enough analysis, and enough rational deliberation. That if you build a long enough list of pros and cons, if you consult enough experts, if you sleep on it for the right number of nights, clarity will arrive like a verdict from a court of law, clean, signed, and final. This belief is not entirely wrong. It is, however, dangerously incomplete, because the belief assumes that every relevant piece of information about a decision arrives in a form your rational mind can process. It assumes that the most important data comes through spreadsheets, references, track records, and visible credentials. It assumes that what cannot be measured cannot be trusted, and that what cannot be explained cannot be used. This assumption has led more people into catastrophic choices than almost any other single error in human discernment. The hidden warning does not arrive as a spreadsheet. It does not knock on the front door and announce itself with a formal letter. It does not schedule a meeting. It appears in the way your breath shortens when someone says a particular name. It appears in the way your eyes move away from the contract before you have finished reading it. It appears in the way the conversation keeps circling around one specific question that nobody will answer directly. The hidden warning is data. It is simply data in a language that your formal education never taught you to read. The false belief says that hesitation is weakness, that if you were truly ready, you would not pause, that if you were truly aligned, you would feel pure certainty with no shadow of doubt. This is one of the most dangerous myths embedded inside the decision-making culture of the modern world. Because hesitation is not weakness. Hesitation is frequently the first language of a warning. Hesitation is the body saying, "Not yet." Hesitation is the subconscious pattern recognition system throwing up a flag before the conscious mind has caught up to what the deeper layers already perceive. There is another layer to this false belief that must be addressed, the belief that if a warning cannot be justified, it should be dismissed. That if you feel uneasy about an opportunity but cannot name the exact reason for your unease, the unease does not count. That if the numbers look right and the person seems trustworthy and the timing appears acceptable, your discomfort must be irrational and should be overridden in the name of logic and courage. This is the mechanism by which the hidden warning is silenced, not by evil forces, not by external manipulation, but by your own trained dismissal of the intelligence your inner system is broadcasting. Consider what the hidden warning actually is before it is labeled as intuition or superstition or fear. It is pattern recognition operating below the threshold of conscious analysis. Your nervous system has been recording data about people, environments, tones, rhythms, inconsistencies, and energetic signatures your entire life. It has cataloged thousands of micro-experiences. It has tracked what happened after certain kinds of conversations, after certain kinds of silences, after certain kinds of offers that arrived with certain kinds of urgency. And when a new decision arrives, that entire archive begins comparing the incoming signal against everything it has already learned. The warning is the result of that comparison. It is not irrational, it is pre-rational. It arrives before the reasoning mind has finished processing. The false belief also insists that external validation is the highest form of confirmation. That if the people around you approve of your decision, the decision must be sound. That if those you respect see the logic must be right. But the people around you are not living inside your body. They are not receiving the signals your nervous system is generating. They are reading the same external evidence you are reading, filtered through their own beliefs, their own histories, and their own investment in what you do next. The approval of others is not the same as inner alignment, and the disapproval of others is not the same as a hidden warning. Here is the reframe that this codex asks you to hold. Hidden warnings are not obstacles to good decisions. They are instruments of good decisions. They are part of the decision-making apparatus. Not the whole apparatus, but a critical component that has been systematically undervalued because it refuses to translate itself into a format that the dominant culture finds acceptable. The warning is the part of the decision-making process that carries information your rational analysis alone cannot access. The most consequential decisions of your life, the ones about where to go, who to trust, what to sign, what to build, what to leave, have never been purely rational. Every person who has made a truly great decision that changed the course of their life has drawn on something beyond the pros and cons list. They may have called it a gut feeling. They may have called it faith. They may have called it instinct. But at the core of all of those words is the same phenomenon. A signal arriving from the deeper layers of awareness, carrying information that the surface mind has not yet assembled into language. This codex does not ask you to abandon reason. It asks you to expand your definition of data. It asks you to treat the body's signals, the timing of friction, the strange omissions in a conversation, the uneasy silence after a question, and the dream that arrives the night before the signing as legitimate sources of intelligence, not as replacements for rational thought, as partners to it. Because the decision that integrates both the visible evidence and the hidden signal is more complete than the decision that uses only one. The belief that logic alone is sufficient for major decisions is the belief that costs the most, not immediately, not always visibly, but in the long passage of time, when you look back at the moments where something in you knew and you overrode it because the numbers looked right, you will recognize the exact cost of that belief. This codex exists to interrupt that pattern before it becomes your story. The black candle does not burn in the room of your past decisions, it burns now. In the room where your next decision is being formed, and the flame is already moving. What you are about to receive inside this archive is not advice about what to decide. The third library does not tell you which path to choose. It reveals the mechanism by which you can read the hidden warnings that already exist inside every major decision you are facing. It reveals why those warnings appear, how they are distorted, and how to distinguish a true warning from a false alarm generated by fear, trauma, or the pressure of people who need you to move faster than you are ready to move. This codex will move through 5 chambers. Each chamber opens something that the previous one prepared you to receive. In the first chamber, you will understand the decision-making system that operates beneath the visible choices. You will learn that every major decision contains layers. There is the layer that is visible to the world, the opportunity, the offer, the option, the apparent choice. And there is the layer beneath it, the one that carries the hidden data, the pattern recognition, the signal from the deeper archive of your lived experience. Most people make major decisions using only the first layer. This codex will teach you to use both. In the second chamber, you will learn why hidden warnings get ignored. Not because people are foolish, but because urgency, social pressure, flattery, scarcity, and the fear of missing something good are among the most effective signal silencers that exist. You will learn to recognize the conditions under which your discernment becomes most vulnerable, so that you can protect it precisely when the stakes are highest. In the third chamber, you will encounter what this codex calls the diagnostic mirror. This is the part of the teaching where you stop looking at the decision and start looking at yourself. Because what you do with a hidden warning reveals something profound about your relationship with your own authority, your own fear, your own desperation, and your own capacity to trust what you know before you can prove it. In the fourth chamber, the archive opens a protocol. The Black Candle Protocol is a practical sequence for reading hidden warnings before any major decision. It is not a ritual. It is not magic in the theatrical sense. It is a structured method for removing noise, consulting the body, and requesting one clean confirmation before you sign your path forward. You will learn the method in full. You will learn its mistakes. You will learn its advanced application in the most difficult categories of decision, where both options look good, where both options look frightening, and where one option looks socially correct but feels spiritually hollow. In the fifth chamber, you will return to where this codex began, to the black candle, to the two unsigned papers. But by the time you arrive there again, the meaning of the flame will have changed entirely, because you will no longer be the person who sees the candle and wonders why it bends. You will be the person who knows how to read what the bending means. This teaching is not passive. It will require you to sit with discomfort. It will ask you to question decisions you have already made and be honest about the warnings you may have overridden. It will ask you to separate what you genuinely feel from what you have been told to feel. That distinction is difficult. It is also one of the most important skills a human being can develop. Every section of this codex builds on the one before it. Do not skip to the protocol without passing through the diagnostic mirror. Do not try to apply the method without first understanding the law beneath the event. The sequence is not arbitrary. The sequence is the teaching. If the language of the third library feels like a language you have been waiting to find, if the idea that reality speaks in patterns and warnings and signals resonates with something ancient inside you, then consider keeping this archive close. Subscribe to the third library. There are more codices waiting to be opened, and every one of them was placed here for the person who is ready to stop mistaking noise for silence and silence for noise. Every major decision exists inside two simultaneous fields. The first field is the field of visible evidence. This is the information that can be gathered through research, conversation, documentation, and observation. It is the field that logic operates in. It is real, and it matters. The second field is the field of invisible evidence. This is the information that arrives through the body, through timing, through the emotional texture of a conversation, through what is not said, through what keeps repeating, through the quality of silence that follows a particular question. Both fields are real. Both fields carry legitimate data. The law beneath every major decision is this: decisions made using only one field are always incomplete. This is not a metaphysical opinion. It is a description of how awareness functions when it is operating at full capacity. The human system is not simply a reasoning machine. It is a sensing apparatus with multiple layers of intelligence. The conscious rational mind is one layer. It is powerful, precise within its range, and essential for evaluating external evidence. But beneath the rational mind is a vast archive of pattern recognition built from every experience, every outcome, every felt sense of alignment or misalignment your system has ever recorded. This deeper layer does not report in words. It reports in felt senses, in the language of the body, in the quality of an atmosphere, in the persistent return of a specific question you keep trying to set aside. Ancient traditions understood this dual field structure of decision-making. They used different language to describe it, but they consistently mapped a distinction between the faculty that reasons and the faculty that perceives. The oracle did not replace the advisor. The sage did not replace the scholar. Both were consulted. Both were considered essential to the complete assessment of a situation. The modern world collapsed that dual structure into a single channel and called the collapse progress. What was actually lost was an entire dimension of legitimate intelligence. The warning system that exists beneath every major decision is not mystical in the sense that it operates outside of natural law. It is mysterious only in the sense that it operates through channels that the dominant culture stopped teaching people to read. It functions through the nervous system, through pattern comparison, through something that researchers in the field of decision science have called somatic markers. These are bodily signals that arise when the system is processing a comparison between incoming information and previously stored outcomes. The body does not wait for the conscious mind to finish deliberating. It begins reporting the results of its own analysis immediately. This means that the strange discomfort you feel when reading a particular contract is not irrational. The contraction in your chest when someone makes an offer is not weakness. The persistent loop of a specific question that will not leave your mind when you try to commit to a path is not anxiety in the clinical sense, though it can feel like it. It is the warning system doing precisely what it was built to do. It is the second field of evidence sending a report to the first field, and the report is being filtered out before it can be received. There is a law operating beneath every event that carries real consequence. The law is this: the greater the stakes, the louder the second field speaks. This is why the hidden warnings around major decisions are almost never subtle in terms of their persistence. They may be subtle in form. They may arrive as a glance that lasted too long, as a word used in a contract that does not match the spoken agreement, as an uneasy night before a meeting you cannot explain. But they are persistent. They return. They circle back. They find new forms of expression until they are either heard and integrated or overridden and buried. The warning system is also calibrated by prior decisions. Every time you honored a warning and the honoring was validated by subsequent events, the system refined its ability to report accurately. Every time you overrode a warning and suffered the consequences, the system attempted to mark that particular combination of signals as a pattern to watch for in the future. And every time you overrode a warning and nothing obviously bad happened, the system registered that result too, sometimes inaccurately, because some costs of ignored warnings take years to become visible. This calibration is important because it means the warning system is not infallible. It is not a perfect oracle. It is an intelligence that learns and that improves through use. It becomes more accurate the more you engage with it honestly. It becomes less accurate the more you suppress it, not because it weakens, but because the channel between that intelligence and your conscious attention becomes narrowed by years of trained dismissal. There is a specific mechanism through which major decisions become vulnerable to false certainty. It is the mechanism of narrative closure. When an opportunity arrives with a compelling story attached to it, a story about who you will become, what you will finally have, how this will solve the problem that has been pressing on you, the narrative creates a kind of gravitational pull. The mind wants closure. It wants the story to resolve. And when a decision promises resolution, the mind begins to construct arguments in favor of that resolution, even before the full evidence has been assessed. The second field is reporting discomfort, but the first field is too invested in the narrative to receive the report. This is why the most dangerous decisions are frequently the ones wrapped in the most exciting stories. The job offer that arrives as a dream come true. The relationship that feels like the answer to years of waiting. The investment that promises to finally correct a long history of financial struggle. The collaboration that appears to be the alignment you have been requesting from the universe. These are not automatically wrong choices, but they are the choices that most reliably silence the warning system, because the excitement of the story drowns out the signal frequency of the second field. The law beneath the event also includes what might be called the timing signal. Warnings are not only about what to choose, they are frequently about when. A decision that is wrong in one timing window may be correct in another. The warning system reports on timing with particular consistency, often through the experience of friction. When every step toward a decision generates unexpected resistance, when the logistics keep collapsing, when the people involved keep experiencing confusion or miscommunication, when the paperwork keeps returning with errors, this friction pattern is a form of timing signal. It is not necessarily saying that the choice itself is wrong. It is frequently saying that the moment is wrong, that something in the situation is not yet ready to be finalized. The friction signal is one of the most commonly misread elements of the hidden warning system. In a culture that equates speed with ambition and persistence with virtue, people frequently interpret decision-related friction as a test of their commitment. They believe that pushing through resistance is evidence of character. And sometimes it is. The friction of personal growth, the friction of learning, the friction of building something new, these are real and must be moved through with persistence. But the friction that appears specifically around a pending decision, the friction that multiplies the closer you get to commitment, is a different category of signal entirely. Understanding the difference between growth friction and warning friction is one of the central skills this codex is designed to develop. Growth friction feels like effort inside a direction that still feels open. Warning friction feels like effort inside a direction that keeps narrowing. Growth friction is demanding. Warning friction is suffocating. Growth friction leaves you tired but still oriented. Warning friction leaves you disoriented and slightly more confused after each forward push than you were before. The law beneath the event includes a third dimension beyond the body signal and the timing friction. This third dimension is the pattern of omissions. In any major decision, what is not being said is frequently as important as what is being said. The question that is answered with a change of subject. the detail that seems to get lost in every conversation about it. The person whose name never comes up, even though they are clearly relevant to the arrangement. The timeline that is discussed with great enthusiasm until you ask for a specific date, at which point the conversation becomes suddenly vague. These omissions are not always evidence of deception. Sometimes they are evidence of disorganization, which is itself relevant information. But they are always evidence that the full picture has not yet been assembled, and a major decision made without the full picture is a decision made in the dark. The archive holds a record that most people have experienced but rarely named, the record of the moment they knew. Not the moment they decided, but the moment they knew. The moment before the decision was finalized, in which the inner system sent a clear and undeniable signal that something was not aligned. And then the decision was made anyway, because the external pressure was too great, because the opportunity seemed too rare, because the people involved seemed too important to disappoint, because the moment of knowing was overridden by the momentum of events already in motion. This is the moment the Black Candle Protocol is designed to create space around, not to eliminate the decision, not to guarantee an outcome, but to ensure that the moment of knowing receives its proper weight in the full accounting of what a major decision requires. The hidden warning system is always broadcasting. This is not poetic language. This is a description of an ongoing function. The system does not switch off because you have decided to be optimistic. It does not go silent because you have told it to be quiet. It continues to report. It continues to compare the incoming signal against the archived record of previous outcomes. And it continues to attempt to communicate its findings through every channel available to it, which is why ignored warnings find new forms of expression with increasing intensity the closer you get to an irreversible commitment. The law beneath the event is ultimately a law of completion. You are not meant to make major decisions using only part of your awareness. You are not meant to silence an entire intelligence system because it reports in a language your culture has devalued. You are meant to integrate both fields, the visible evidence and the hidden signal, the rational analysis and the somatic report, the external information and the internal confirmation. A decision that emerges from that integration is not a perfect decision. Nothing in life arrives as perfect, but it is a complete decision. And complete decisions carry a different quality of consequence than incomplete ones. When you finally make a decision from that completeness, something shifts in the experience of making it. There is still uncertainty. There is still the unknown. There is still the gap between choice and outcome that requires faith to cross. But there is no longer the specific discomfort of knowing that you have silenced something in order to move forward. There is no longer the low-frequency weight of an unaddressed warning sitting beneath the surface of your optimism. There is instead a kind of earned clarity, not the clarity of certainty, the clarity of integration. The Black Candle does not promise that the paper it leans toward is the right one in a cosmic sense. It reports what the deeper intelligence is perceiving in this moment, from this vantage point, with this particular configuration of internal and external information. What you do with that report is still your choice. It has always been your choice. The protocol does not remove your agency, it restores it. Because you cannot make a fully sovereign decision while one of your most important intelligence systems is being silenced. The law beneath the event is simple enough to carry in a single sentence, though it took this entire section to build the structure necessary for you to receive it fully. The sentence is this: Every major decision already contains within it the intelligence needed to make it wisely, and that intelligence is distributed across 2 fields, not 1, and it requires both fields to be consulted before the paper is signed. This is the law. This is the mechanism. This is what the black candle has always been pointing toward. The next chamber of this archive will reveal why, even knowing this law, most people override the warning anyway. The warning has been present. You have, at some point in your life, felt it. That unnameable pull away from something that appeared, on the surface, to be exactly what you needed. And yet you moved forward anyway. The question this chamber asks is not whether you ignored the warning. The question is, what was the force strong enough to override it? The first force is urgency. Urgency is one of the most effective warning silencers that exists within human decision-making environments. When a situation is framed as time-sensitive, when someone communicates, directly or through implication, that this opportunity will not wait for your deliberation, the rational mind shifts from evaluation mode to acquisition mode. The entire cognitive posture changes. Instead of asking whether this is right, the mind begins asking how to secure it before it disappears. The hidden warning is still broadcasting, but the frequency of urgency drowns out the frequency of the signal. And because urgency feels important, feels real, feels like the most pressing reality in the room, the quieter intelligence of the second field gets classified as a luxury the moment does not have time to accommodate. Urgency is especially effective when it arrives as a gift, when someone appears to be doing you a favor by rushing you, when the deadline is framed as a protection rather than a pressure. The warning becomes even harder to access. You are grateful. And gratitude, in that particular configuration, can become a silencing mechanism. You do not want to appear ungrateful by asking for more time. You do not want to seem suspicious when someone has apparently gone out of their way to offer you something valuable. The social math of the moment works against your ability to pause and receive what your inner system is broadcasting. The second force is social pressure. This operates differently from urgency but is equally effective as a warning suppressor. Social pressure works through the mechanism of comparison. It activates the part of your awareness that monitors how you appear to others, that calculates what your hesitation communicates about your intelligence, your ambition, your readiness, or your sanity. When the people around you see no warning, when they are enthusiastic about the opportunity you are sitting with in discomfort, when your hesitation makes you the strange one in the room, the pressure to align your perception with the group perception becomes enormous. The hidden warning does not care about social consensus. It is reporting from a field that operates independently of what others think about the situation. But your conscious mind cares deeply about social consensus because social belonging is one of the most fundamental human needs, and the nervous system treats social rejection with a seriousness that is difficult to overstate. So when honoring a warning would mean appearing irrational to people whose opinion you value, the social cost of honoring it becomes part of the decision calculus. And frequently, that cost is high enough to override the signal entirely. The third force is flattery. This is perhaps the most elegant of the warning silencers because it works by expanding the self rather than contracting it. When a decision comes wrapped in the message that you are particularly suited for it, that you were chosen because of your specific qualities, that this opportunity was designed with your abilities in mind, the inner warning encounters a new obstacle. The obstacle is not fear. The obstacle is pleasure. The ego is receiving information it enjoys receiving, and the enjoyment of that information creates a kind of interference pattern that makes the signal from the second field harder to isolate and hear. This is why people with high ambition and high sensitivity are sometimes the most vulnerable to ignored warnings. The ambition responds to the flattery. The sensitivity feels the discomfort, and the two create a kind of internal paralysis in which the person keeps waiting for one to resolve before acting on the other. The flattery, however, is louder and more socially reinforced. The sensitivity has no external champion, and so the flattery wins. The fourth force is scarcity framing. Scarcity is not always manufactured. Sometimes things are genuinely rare, but the feeling of scarcity, the feeling that this is the last chance, that opportunities like this do not repeat, that this door will close and not open again, is one of the most reliable cognitive environments in which warnings get silenced, because scarcity activates the fear of loss. And fear of loss is, for most people, more motivationally powerful than the anticipation of gain. When the mind is processing a potential loss, the warning signal gets rerouted. Instead of being received as guidance, it gets reinterpreted as the voice of inadequacy. The discomfort is no longer heard as a signal from the second field. It is recast as the feeling of someone who is about to miss out because they are not brave enough to act. The fifth force is emotional exhaustion. This is the force that does not announce itself, but is perhaps the most pervasive of all the warning silencers. When someone has been waiting for a long time, when they've endured multiple disappointments, when they've been trying to create a specific outcome for months or years and the trying has cost them significant emotional energy, the arrival of any opportunity begins to carry a different weight. The body is tired. The hope has been rebuilt and collapsed so many times that the rebuilding itself has become effortful. And when something finally arrives that looks like what they have been waiting for, the warning system's report gets interpreted through the lens of that exhaustion. The signal is no longer received as guidance. It is received as more of the same doubt that has accompanied every previous attempt. The person has been doubting themselves for so long that they can no longer tell the difference between the voice of legitimate warning and the voice of their own worn-down fear. The sixth force is the momentum of events already in motion. This is the force that operates not at the beginning of a decision, but in the middle and near the end of it. When weeks or months of preparation have already been invested, when other people are counting on the decision, when the infrastructure of the choice has already begun to be built, the warning that arrives late in the process encounters a wall of sunk cost. The mind, confronting the scale of what has already been invested, begins to reason that reversing course now would waste everything that has already been spent. And so the warning is overridden not because the person does not feel it, but because the cost of honoring it feels higher than the cost of proceeding. There is a deeply important recognition embedded in understanding these forces. None of them are signs of weakness. None of them indicate that the person who succumbed to them was foolish or spiritually undeveloped. These forces are sophisticated. They operate precisely where the human system is most naturally responsive. Urgency triggers the survival instinct. Social pressure triggers the belonging instinct. Flattery triggers the identity instinct. Scarcity triggers the loss aversion instinct. Exhaustion undermines the discernment capacity. Momentum activates the consistency drive. These are not simple forces. They are ancient, and they are designed, whether consciously by external actors or simply by the structure of situations, to work. Understanding them is not about becoming immune to them. It is about developing the capacity to recognize their presence at the moment they are most active. Because the most dangerous time for a hidden warning is not when you are calm, deliberate, and well-rested. It is when urgency is high, social pressure is activated, flattery is present, scarcity has been framed, exhaustion is real, and events are already in motion. That is precisely the environment in which the Black Candle Protocol becomes most essential, and that is precisely the environment in which most people forget to use it. There is also a subtler distortion that must be addressed in this chamber, the distortion of spiritual bypassing within discernment. This is when someone uses the language of trust, surrender, and faith to override a legitimate warning. They tell themselves that their discomfort is just the ego resisting growth. They tell themselves that fear is always an obstacle to be moved through. They invoke the principle that things are working out, that they should stop overthinking and trust the flow. And sometimes these things are true, but sometimes they are the spiritual idiom of urgency, a way of invoking the language of surrender to silence a signal that deserves to be heard. The hidden warning is not always fear. The hidden warning is sometimes the most spiritually mature voice in the room, the one that knows what faith actually requires of you. And faith, properly understood, is not the suppression of intelligence in the name of optimism. It is the willingness to act from the most complete awareness available to you, including the awareness that something in this situation has not yet been fully revealed. The archive opens now to the record of lives, not famous lives, not dramatic cautionary tales constructed for effect, the lives that belong to the kind of person reading this now. The ordinary, extraordinary lives in which major decisions were made while a hidden warning was broadcasting, and the consequence of that misread signal changed everything that followed. Consider the person who accepted a job offer. The offer arrived after a long period of searching, after months of rejection letters and interviews that led nowhere. The job itself was not ideal, but it was something. The salary was adequate. The title was respectable. During the final interview, something felt off. The hiring manager answered every question about team culture with a sentence that circled back to how demanding the role would be. The person noted this internally, but attributed it to professional candor. They accepted the offer within 24 hours because they were afraid the window would close. 6 months later, they were in an environment with unsustainable expectations, isolated from any sense of team, and managing the psychological weight of knowing they had felt this before accepting. The warning had been precise. The friction signal was in the interview itself. The urgency overrode it. Now consider a different version of the same story. Another person, same period of searching, similar exhaustion. An offer arrived. During the final conversation, a question about creative freedom was met with a long pause, followed by a careful non-answer. The person noticed the pause. They did not dismiss it. They asked the question again in a different form. They received another careful non-answer. They requested 48 hours to consider the offer, used that time to speak with someone who had previously worked in the organization, and learned that creative decision-making was tightly controlled at every level. They declined the offer. 3 months later, a different opportunity arrived, one that had not been visible when the first offer appeared. The warning in the pause was real. The pause was the signal. The request for 48 hours was the protocol working. The pattern of accepting a contract is one of the densest warning environments that exists, because contracts carry legal finality that makes the cost of an unread warning extremely high. Consider the person who signed a business agreement without reading a specific clause that had been described verbally in one way and written in another. During the signing meeting, they had noticed a feeling of resistance when they reached that clause, but had pushed through it because the other party was present. The atmosphere was optimistic, and stopping to examine the discrepancy felt like an accusation. The warning was in the resistance. The resistance was the second field reporting that something in the document did not match what had been communicated verbally. Months later, that clause became the center of a dispute that cost both time and money. A different contract story. Someone is offered a partnership agreement. They feel genuinely excited about the collaboration. They also notice that every time they ask about the exit terms, the conversation finds a way to move forward before the question is fully answered. The pattern of the omission is clear after the third time it happens. They pause the signing process. They bring in an independent advisor to review the document before proceeding. The exit terms, when examined, are structured in a way that would make it almost impossible to leave the partnership without significant financial penalty. The omission was the warning. The repeated deflection was the signal. The pause was the protocol. In the domain of relationships, the hidden warning operates through a specific frequency that is different from the warning signals around professional decisions. It is more intimate, more entangled with personal history, more likely to be mistaken for ordinary anxiety. Consider someone entering a significant relationship who notices, in the first months, that certain questions about the other person's past are always met with answers that feel slightly rehearsed, not dishonest exactly, but curated in a way that leaves the questioner with a neat answer and somehow less information than they arrived with. The warning is in the curation. The signal is the persistent feeling of not quite seeing the full picture. But the warmth of the connection, the genuine chemistry, the relief of not being alone, all of these create an interference pattern. The warning is present, the noise is louder. The pattern in that kind of relationship warning is not that you feel afraid. You may feel wonderful most of the time. The warning appears in the specific moments, the moment a question is deflected, the moment a commitment is reframed as too soon even after significant time has passed, the moment you realize that you have never been introduced to a single member of their inner circle despite months of intimacy. These are not dramatic signs. They are subtle, persistent omissions. They are the second field reporting that the picture being offered is carefully managed, and that what is being managed is worth examining before a deeper commitment is made. Consider the person who chose to relocate their life. A new city, a new opportunity, what appeared to be a complete reinvention. The decision arrived during a period of genuine stagnation in their current location. Everything in their environment felt stale. The new city promised energy, connection, a network of people doing the kind of work they wanted to do. During the planning period, they noticed that every time they imagined themselves fully settled in the new place, the image felt slightly cold. Not impossible, not wrong, but cold. They attributed this to fear of change and continued planning. Upon arrival, they found that the network they had imagined was not as accessible as it had appeared from a distance, that the cost of living was higher than they had accounted for, and that the loneliness of starting entirely from scratch in an unfamiliar city was deeper than they had prepared for. The cold image was the signal. It was not saying, "Do not go." It was saying, "This is not what you think it is. Look more carefully before you commit fully." A different relocation story. Someone feels the pull toward a new city. During research, they visit the place 3 times rather than once, at different times of year, with different people, in different contexts. On the 3rd visit, the image they carry of themselves there stops feeling cold and starts feeling inhabited. The resistance lifts, not into false certainty, but into genuine readiness. They move with fuller information and fuller inner preparation. The warning process was not ignored. It was used. The 3 visits were not anxiety. They were the protocol responding to a signal that something had not yet been seen clearly enough. In the domain of financial decisions, particularly investments, the hidden warning operates in a specific way that must be understood. Consider someone offered an investment opportunity by a trusted social contact. The contact is genuinely excited. The pitch is compelling. The numbers are presented in a way that makes the potential return feel concrete and the risk feel minimal. During the presentation, the person asking the questions notices that every question about what happens if the investment underperforms is answered with a redirect toward the upside. The pattern is consistent. Every question about downside risk becomes an answer about upside potential. The redirect itself is the warning. It is not evidence of fraud necessarily. It may be evidence of an inability to hold complexity. But it is a signal that the full picture is not being offered, and a financial decision made without a full picture of risk is not a complete decision. Another investment story. Someone is offered the same category of opportunity. They notice the redirect pattern in the second conversation. They request a meeting specifically dedicated to discussing downside scenarios. If the other party resists that meeting, refuses to engage with downside modeling, or continues to redirect toward upside when the meeting finally occurs, the pattern of avoidance has now been confirmed across multiple interactions. That confirmation is a signal at a different level of clarity than the initial discomfort. The request for a dedicated downside conversation was the protocol in action. The pattern of avoidance in response to that request was the second field of evidence becoming visible. Beginning a collaboration is a decision that carries particular warning patterns because the early energy of collaborative excitement is one of the most reliable warning masking environments. 2 people or more come together around a shared idea. The chemistry is real. The vision is aligned in its broadest strokes. The early conversations generate genuine enthusiasm. And in that enthusiasm, the very specific questions about structure, ownership, responsibility, conflict resolution, and exit provisions feel like a dampening of the energy, a premature introduction of negativity into something that is still forming. The warning in early collaborations is almost never about the idea itself. It is almost always about the structure, the clarity of agreements, and the willingness of the other parties to engage seriously with the questions that feel uncomfortable to raise. Someone enters a creative collaboration. They notice that every time they raise the question of how decisions will be made when there is a disagreement, the other person pivots to enthusiasm about the shared vision. They raise it a second time in a different context. The pivot happens again. By the 3rd time, the pattern is unmistakable. The other person does not have a framework for navigating disagreement and does not appear motivated to develop one. This is not a judgment about their character. It is a signal about structural readiness. The collaboration that proceeds without a framework for disagreement is the collaboration that will be destroyed by the first significant disagreement. The warning was in the pivot. The protocol was in asking the same question in 3 different contexts and observing the pattern of responses. The examples in this chamber are not meant to generate fear about decisions. They are meant to make the warning signal recognizable in the specific contexts where it most commonly appears: jobs, contracts, relationships, relocations, investments, collaborations. The warning does not wear the same costume in each context, but it has consistent characteristics across all of them. It is persistent. It arrives in the gaps rather than the content. It is felt in the body before it is understood by the mind. And it intensifies the closer the moment of commitment approaches. The record is consistent across all of these stories. The warning was present, the signal was available. The question was always the same. Was the awareness in the room quiet enough, and was the person practiced enough in reading that kind of signal to receive it before the paper was signed? That capacity for reception is what the rest of this codex is designed to develop. The hidden warning does not arrive as a thunderclap. It does not send a formal notification. It does not arrive wearing a label that says warning. It arrives in the texture of an experience, in the grain of a moment. And the first skill of discernment is learning to recognize the specific forms through which it most consistently presents itself. The first form is body contraction. This is perhaps the most universal and most consistently ignored form the hidden warning takes. Before the mind has processed a situation fully, the body has already begun to respond to the incoming data. The contraction is not pain. It is a subtle narrowing, a gathering inward, a pulling away from the direction of the decision at a level below conscious thought. It may appear as a tightening in the chest when a particular name is mentioned. It may appear as a subtle drawing back of the shoulders when you first read a document. It may appear as a change in the quality of your breathing that you notice only when you pause to pay attention. The body does not debate, it reports. The second form is the repeated question that will not resolve. When your mind keeps returning to the same specific question about a pending decision, not because you are generally anxious, but because that particular question keeps arriving without answer, you are receiving a warning in the form of a persistent loop. The loop is not your mind malfunctioning. It is your inner system refusing to accept closure on a point that has not yet been satisfied. The most common error is to interpret this loop as worry and to attempt to silence it through reassurance rather than investigation. The loop is asking for information. It is not asking to be comforted. It is asking to be answered. The third form is the quality of the atmosphere around the decision. This is subtler than the body contraction and requires a more developed sensitivity to detect. But once you learn to recognize it, it becomes unmistakable. The atmosphere around a genuine opportunity, even a challenging one, has a quality of openness. There is space in it. There's a sense that questions are welcomed. There's an ease of information flow, even when the information itself is complex or demanding. The atmosphere around a situation that carries a hidden warning tends to have a different quality, a slight opacity, a sense that the room is not quite fully illuminated, a feeling that something in the space is being held back, not necessarily with malicious intent, but withheld nonetheless. The fourth form is the dream. Not every dream is a warning. Not every symbol in the sleep space should be analyzed for its decision-making implications. But when a significant decision is pending and a dream arrives with a specific emotional quality, a quality of urgency, of warning, of a door that will not open or a path that keeps looping back to where it started, the dream deserves to be noted. not as a definitive oracle. As a piece of evidence from the second field that something in the processing of this decision has not yet reached resolution. The fifth form is the overheard phrase, the conversation fragment you catch in passing that speaks directly to your situation in a way that feels impossible to attribute to coincidence. The timing of these moments is almost always precise in relation to the decision. They arrive in the window between first consideration and final commitment, as if the second field of intelligence is using every available channel to send its report. The overheard phrase is not magic in the theatrical sense. It is a form of confirmation bias operating in service of genuine discernment. Your awareness is specifically attuned to information relevant to the pending decision, and the signal, when it arrives through an unexpected source, carries a particular quality of recognition. That quality of recognition is the warning marking itself. The sixth form is the strange omission in conversation. This has been mentioned in previous chambers, but it deserves its own dedicated place in the map of how warnings appear. An omission is when the information that should logically be present in a conversation is consistently absent. A business partner who never mentions their previous failed venture. A landlord who enthusiastically describes the property's features but changes the subject every time you ask about the neighbors. A hiring manager who answers every question about compensation with enthusiasm but becomes vague when the question of team turnover is raised. The omission is not always a deliberate concealment, but it is always a signal that something in the picture has not been made available to you. And a decision made without that piece of the picture is a decision made with incomplete information. The seventh form is what might be called the uneasy silence. Not all silence is uneasy. Silence between two people who trust each other is one of the most comfortable environments in human experience. But the silence that arrives after a very specific question, the pause that is slightly too long, the moment where the answer should be simple, but the simplicity has somehow been replaced by a considered quiet. This form of silence is a warning in real time. It is the second field making a visible report through the gap in the other person's response. The eighth form is the pattern of friction in logistics. When the practical steps toward a decision keep encountering obstacles that seem disproportionate to the complexity of the task. When the paperwork keeps getting lost, when the meetings keep being rescheduled, when the communication keeps breaking down at critical moments, the friction pattern itself is a warning category. This does not mean that logistical complexity is always a sign that the decision is wrong. Some of the best things in life require extraordinary effort to reach. But there is a specific character of friction that appears around decisions whose timing is not right, and that character has a quality of systematic interference rather than random difficulty. It feels less like a steep hill and more like a door that keeps relocating itself. The ninth form is the absence of confirmation. This is the inverse signal. When you are moving toward a decision that is genuinely aligned, small confirmations tend to appear in the field around you. Not dramatic signs, but small moments of alignment. A conversation that provides a piece of information you needed. A meeting that happens to include someone directly relevant to your question. A reading, a phrase, a moment of unexpected clarity. These are the second field's version of a green light. Their absence around a particular decision is not conclusive, but when every attempt to find confirmation for a path is met with silence or with information that raises more questions than it answers, the absence of confirmation is itself a form of signal. The 10th form is the physical response to imagining the commitment fulfilled. This is a practice built into the Black Candle Protocol, but it is also a naturally occurring signal that can be observed without a formal practice. When you imagine the decision fully executed, when you imagine yourself on the other side of the commitment, living inside the outcome, what does your body do? Does it expand? Does it open? Does it release? Or does it contract, narrow, stiffen, or flatten? The body's response to a vividly imagined future is one of the most direct and least mediated forms of the second field's reporting. It has not been coached by the external narrative. It responds to the imagined reality with its own accumulated intelligence. The 11th form is the return of a pattern from the past. When the current decision presents characteristics that match a previous decision that carried hidden costs, the second field activates the memory of that pattern and generates a signal that is specifically calibrated to that recognition. This is not superstition. This is the body and the deep archive of experience doing exactly what they were designed to do, protecting you by flagging the recurrence of a pattern that previously carried consequence. The error is not in receiving this signal. The error is in either dismissing it because the surface details of the current situation appear different, or in over-applying it so that every situation that resembles a previous difficult one is automatically treated as dangerous, which is a distortion that will be addressed in the next chamber. The 12th form is the response of someone who knows you deeply, not the response of the crowd, not the response of those invested in your decision, but the response of the one or two people who have known you long enough and honestly enough to tell you what they observe without filtering it through what they think you want to hear. When that person hesitates, when that person asks the question that no one else is asking, when that person looks at you with an expression that is not alarm but is not enthusiasm either, their response is a form of the warning signal arriving through the most reliable human channel available to you. The 13th form is the impulse to perform certainty. When you find yourself reassuring others about the decision before they have expressed doubt, when you are selling the choice to people who have not questioned it, when you are constructing elaborate justifications for a path that should, if genuinely aligned, speak for itself, the impulse to perform certainty is itself a warning. It indicates that the inner system is not settled and that the performance of confidence is a compensation for the discomfort the second field is broadcasting. The warning system speaks in all of these forms and more. It is not waiting for you to develop a special ability to receive it. It is already broadcasting. The practice is not cultivation of a new sense. The practice is the progressive removal of the noise that has been drowning the signal out. Write the word signal in the comments if you have ever felt that reality was trying to get your attention before a major decision, and you only understood the message after the fact. When a hidden warning is received and honored, it reveals one thing. When a hidden warning is received and ignored, it reveals something else entirely. This chamber is not about judging what you have done with warnings in the past. It is about developing an honest understanding of the inner conditions that make warnings difficult to honor, because until those conditions are recognized, the protocol alone is not sufficient. The first thing an ignored warning reveals is the presence of approval addiction. This is one of the most pervasive and least acknowledged conditions affecting decision-making. Approval addiction is not simply wanting people to like you. It is the structural belief often formed early in life and running below conscious awareness that your choices require external validation to be legitimate, that a decision you make alone, based on something you feel and cannot prove, is not trustworthy unless someone else confirms it. Approval addiction makes the warning essentially invisible in social contexts, because the moment the social environment endorses a decision, the body's signal of discomfort gets reclassified as personal doubt rather than legitimate intelligence. The signature of approval addiction in decision-making is the specific suffering that arrives when you consider honoring a warning that others cannot see. You feel the discomfort of the warning. You also feel the anticipated discomfort of disappointing, confusing, or failing to meet the expectations of the people invested in your decision. And the second discomfort, the social one, consistently outweighs the first, not because it is more important, but because it is more immediate, more concrete, and more connected to the deep conditioning that says your belonging in the community is contingent on your alignment with its expectations. The second thing an ignored warning reveals is desperation. Desperation is not a moral failing. It is the natural result of sustained want in the presence of prolonged waiting. When someone has been holding a desire for a very long time, the desire itself can become a lens that distorts the quality of incoming information. The job that finally arrives after years of searching looks different to a desperate person than it looks to a person in abundance. The relationship that arrives after years of loneliness carries a different emotional charge than it would for someone with a full social world. And the investment that promises to solve a long financial struggle has a different gravitational pull for someone who has been managing scarcity than for someone making the same decision from a place of stability. Desperation is the condition under which the second field signal most consistently gets reinterpreted as a barrier to be overcome rather than a message to be received. When you are desperate enough, every form of hesitation begins to feel like the enemy of your desire. The warning gets classified as the part of you that has always sabotaged your good fortune, rather than as the part of you that is genuinely attempting to protect the integrity of the outcome you are seeking. The third thing an ignored warning reveals is a distrust of inner authority. This is subtly different from approval addiction, though they often coexist. Distrust of inner authority is the specific belief that what you perceive internally is less reliable than what the external world presents. It is the accumulated effect of being told, directly or through cultural conditioning, that your feelings are not facts, that your intuition is not intelligent, that your hesitation is irrational, and that the only trustworthy information is the information that can be externally verified. This belief, when it runs deep, makes the hidden warning essentially invisible by categorizing it as noise before it can be examined as signal. The signature of distrust in inner authority is the characteristic response to a felt warning, the immediate dismissal, not the consideration and then the dismissal, the immediate reclassification. You feel the contraction and almost instantly translate it into "I am just being anxious" without ever pausing to ask what the contraction is actually responding to. The feeling is present for a fraction of a second, and then it is already being explained away. The explaining away is so rapid and so automatic that it does not feel like a choice. It feels like clarity, but it is actually the suppression of an intelligence that has not yet been given the opportunity to complete its report. The fourth thing an ignored warning reveals is a scarcity relationship with opportunity itself. When someone believes, at a deep structural level, that good opportunities are rare, that they do not visit twice, that the right to have something wonderful is limited and must be seized when it appears rather than evaluated carefully. The hidden warning encounters a specific kind of override. The override is not social. It is cosmological. It is the belief that the universe does not provide in abundance, that each opportunity lost is a permanent diminishment, and that the cautious person gets left behind in a world that rewards the bold. This is one of the most painful internal conditions to acknowledge because it is so often reinforced by genuine experience. People who grew up in scarcity have real memories of opportunities that did not return. People who have watched others succeed by moving quickly have real evidence that speed can produce results. But the scarcity relationship with opportunity systematically prevents the kind of deliberate discernment that distinguishes between an opportunity that is genuinely aligned and one that merely appears valuable because the field of perception has been narrowed by the belief that this might be the last one. The fifth thing an ignored warning reveals is the weight of an unexamined identity commitment. This is when the decision has become entangled with who you believe you are or who you are trying to become. The job offer that feels like finally arriving at your professional identity. The relationship that feels like finally becoming the person who is loved. The investment that feels like finally becoming someone who has financial authority over their life. When a decision has been merged with an identity claim, the warning that threatens to complicate or delay the decision is experienced not as information, but as a threat to the self. And the self, when it feels threatened, does not deliberate. It defends. The sixth thing an ignored warning reveals is an unresolved relationship with responsibility itself. Some people ignore warnings not because they are afraid of missing the opportunity, but because they are afraid of the responsibility that comes with honoring their own discernment. If you honor the warning and decline the decision, you are taking responsibility for that choice. You are claiming the authority of your own perception. You are saying, through your action, that you trust what you feel enough to act on it, even when others disagree. That level of self-authority is frightening to someone who has never been given permission to trust themselves. It is easier, in a particular kind of way, to proceed against the warning and to blame the outcome on external forces if it goes wrong, than to honor the warning and to own the full weight of that choice. This is not a judgment. It is a recognition of the specific psychological territory that makes discernment difficult for people who have not yet fully claimed the authority of their own awareness. The Black Candle Protocol is, in part, a practice of slowly building that claim, not as an act of isolation from others' wisdom, as an act of integrating your own intelligence into the decision-making process, alongside all other available sources. The seventh thing an ignored warning reveals, and this is perhaps the most important for the person who has already experienced significant consequences from overriding a warning, is the pattern of returning to the same category of decision under the same internal conditions. When the same kind of decision keeps appearing in your life, and the warning keeps being ignored and the consequence keeps arriving with the same essential quality, the pattern is not about bad luck. It is about an unaddressed inner condition that continues to generate the same kind of override in the same category of situation. The pattern is the message, and the message is not that you are destined to repeat it. The message is that the condition beneath the override has not yet been met with the understanding it requires. That understanding begins here, in the mirror, not in the protocol, not in the examples. In this direct examination of what the ignored warning is actually revealing about the internal architecture from which the decision was made. The eighth dimension of this mirror is the most personal. It is the question of what you already knew, not what you suspected, not what you feared, what you actually knew. Because if you are honest, and this codex asks for nothing less, there was a moment in most of the significant decisions where a warning was present and ignored when you knew. The question is not whether you knew. The question is what you will choose to do the next time the knowing arrives, now that you understand it a little more clearly than you did before. That question is the entire point of this chamber. It does not need an answer right now. It needs to sit in the room of your awareness and be felt. The warning system is real. And the warning system can be wrong. More precisely, the channel through which warnings travel can carry distortions, interferences, and misattributions that make fear look like a signal, that make past trauma look like present warning, that make resistance to growth look like protection, and that make the voice of avoidance look like the voice of discernment. This chamber is devoted entirely to that distinction, because without it, the teaching becomes a framework for paralysis rather than a tool for precision. The first category of distortion is fear of growth mistaken for a warning. Growth carries discomfort. Every genuine expansion of capacity, identity, or life circumstance generates a form of internal resistance that is physiologically similar to threat detection. The body does not automatically distinguish between the discomfort of genuine danger and the discomfort of genuine expansion. Both activate the stress response. Both generate contraction, hesitation, and the impulse to return to what is known. This is why a person who has lived their whole life in a particular size of experience will frequently feel genuine body-level warning signals when confronted with an opportunity that requires them to operate at a larger scale. The distortion here is not that the warning is false in the sense of being fabricated. It is that the warning is misattributed. The signal is real. The interpretation is incorrect. The body is saying this is unfamiliar, and unfamiliarity activates the threat system. But unfamiliarity is not the same as misalignment. A new city can feel genuinely threatening to someone who has never lived outside their home region, and that threat response can look and feel identical to the warning signal that would appear around a genuinely dangerous relocation. Distinguishing between them requires a specific kind of examination that will be detailed in the protocol. The second category of distortion is trauma memory activated by surface similarity. This is perhaps the most nuanced and most consequential of the false signal categories. When a current situation contains elements that resemble a previous experience of harm, betrayal, or significant loss, the nervous system activates a threat response that is calibrated to the original harm rather than to the current situation. The body has learned correctly from its own experience that certain patterns carry danger. But the pattern matching system is not infinitely sophisticated. It can flag a situation as dangerous based on surface-level similarities that do not reflect the deeper reality of the new circumstance. Someone who experienced financial betrayal in a previous business partnership may generate strong warning signals around every subsequent business partnership, regardless of the character, integrity, or transparency of the new potential partner. The warning feels real because it is real in the sense that the nervous system is genuinely activating. But the target of the warning is the past, not the present. Distinguishing trauma-activated false signals from genuine present-moment warnings requires both honest self-knowledge and a willingness to investigate the current situation on its own terms, rather than through the lens of what it resembles. The third category of distortion is chronic overthinking that generates warnings through volume rather than through accuracy. The mind that cannot be still will eventually generate a warning about anything. When the internal environment is continuously occupied with analysis, worst-case modeling, and iterative re-examination of every detail, the sheer volume of negative possibility scenarios begins to look like a warning system. But it is not a signal from the second field. It is the noise of an overactive first field that has lost the capacity for stillness, and with it, the capacity to distinguish real signals from the interference it generates through its own constant motion. The signature of overthinking-generated false warning is that the apparent warning shifts. It is not consistent. It is not persistent in a single direction. It circulates from one concern to another. Today, the warning seems to be about the financial risk. Tomorrow, the warning seems to be about the timing. The day after, it is about the other person's intentions. The day after that, it is about your own readiness. A genuine warning tends to be stable in its focus. It keeps returning to the same specific element of the situation, not circulating through an ever-expanding catalog of possible concerns. The fourth category of distortion is resistance to responsibility. This is the distortion that uses the language and felt sense of a warning to avoid the demands of commitment. A significant opportunity, when genuinely considered, brings with it the weight of what it will require. The relationship that could be beautiful will also require consistency, vulnerability, and the navigation of difficulty. The career path that could be fulfilling will also require sustained effort, public exposure, and the management of failure. The investment that could produce returns will also require active attention, learning, and the tolerance of uncertainty. When the weight of what is required becomes the object of the inner system's resistance, that resistance can generate signals that feel identical to a warning about the opportunity itself. The key distinction between this distortion and a genuine warning is the specificity of the signal. A genuine warning is typically specific. It points toward a particular element of the situation, a particular person, a particular clause, a particular pattern of behavior, a particular timing concern. The distortion of responsibility avoidance generates a more general sense of, I am not ready, or this is too much, or something is not right, that cannot be pinned to any specific observable feature of the situation. The vagueness itself is part of the diagnostic. The fifth category of distortion is superstition that has been mistaken for discernment. This is the application of magical thinking to the warning system in a way that disconnects the signal from any legitimate intelligence and substitutes it with arbitrary pattern matching. The number on the address looks bad. The color of the car that cut you off on the way to the meeting is an omen. The fact that it rained on the day you were supposed to sign is a cosmic refusal. These interpretations are not discernment. They are the mind seeking to manage anxiety by creating the illusion of a readable universe where every random event carries a message. Discernment reads signals that arise from the genuine field of intelligence, from the body, from pattern recognition, from the quality of information flow, from timing in relation to real readiness. Superstition reads arbitrary external events and assigns them the weight of intelligence they do not carry. The distinction matters because a discernment system contaminated by superstition will generate false positives at such a high rate that the genuine warnings become impossible to isolate. When everything is a sign, nothing is a signal. The sixth category of distortion is the avoidance of necessary grief. Sometimes what feels like a warning about a future decision is actually the unprocessed grief of a previous loss that is using the current decision as an arena in which to be felt. The person who lost a previous relationship and has not fully grieved that loss may generate warning signals around every new relationship. Not because new relationships are genuinely dangerous, but because the psyche is using the approach of intimacy to surface the grief that was never completed. The warning feels real. The discomfort is genuine. But the source is not the current situation. It is the unfinished emotional business of a previous one. This category of distortion requires the most gentleness in addressing because the grief is real and it deserves to be honored. But honoring grief is not the same as classifying it as a warning about the future. The path forward involves acknowledging the grief for what it is, allowing it its proper process, and then, from that more complete place, looking at the current decision again with clearer eyes. The seventh category is simple unpreparedness, mistaken for spiritual warning. Sometimes the resistance to a decision is not a warning from the second field. It is the honest recognition that you are not yet equipped to execute this particular path. You do not have the skills. You do not have the resources. You do not have the relationships. And rather than naming that directly and building toward the required preparation, the inner system generates a more ambiguous discomfort that gets coded as "this is not right for me," rather than "I am not yet ready for this." The distinction matters because one interpretation closes a door and the other keeps it open while directing you toward necessary development. The practice of distinguishing genuine warnings from these categories of distortion is not about achieving a perfect filter. It is about developing enough inner literacy to pause, examine the signal, ask what specific element it is pointing toward, and check whether that element survives investigation. A genuine warning gets clearer under examination. A false signal tends to shift, dissolve, or reveal its true origin when it is looked at directly. This is the chamber where the archive offers the protocol. The Black Candle Protocol is not a ceremony. It is a decision preparation framework. It is a structured sequence for moving through the warning field of a major decision with enough presence, honesty, and deliberate attention to receive what the second field is broadcasting and to separate that signal from the distortions described in the previous chamber. It is not a guarantee. It is a method. The first step of the protocol is the pause. This sounds simple. It is, in practice, one of the most difficult steps in the entire sequence because it runs directly counter to the urgency forces described earlier. The pause is the deliberate decision to create a gap between the pressure to commit and the act of commitment itself, not a gap filled with more analysis, not a gap filled with more conversation. A gap of actual stillness in which the internal system has the space to report without being immediately overridden by the noise of the decision environment. The pause must be real. A pause of 5 minutes during which you check your phone is not a pause. A pause of 30 minutes during which you spend 27 minutes explaining the decision to someone else is not a pause. The pause that the protocol requires is a period, ideally between 24 and 48 hours for significant decisions, during which the external pressure is suspended, the internal environment is quieted, and the body is given time to complete its report without interruption. If the situation is presented to you as one that cannot wait for even 24 hours, that urgency itself becomes the first piece of information to examine within the protocol. Genuine opportunities almost never require immediate commitment in a way that allows no time for reflection. The pressure to decide in a window so small that deliberation is impossible is itself a pattern. Note it. Do not override it. The second step is the removal of external noise. This means, for the duration of the pause period, refraining from discussing the decision with people whose opinion you have already heard. It means refraining from reading more about the opportunity, from researching its upside, from building momentum toward the decision through action or conversation. The external noise is already represented in the first field of evidence. You have the facts, you have the pitch, you have the external recommendation or argument. The purpose of step 2 is to allow the second field, which has been trying to report under all of that noise, to finally be heard in a quieter room. The third step is the body check. This is performed in stillness, not in a moving body, not while walking or driving, but in genuine physical stillness, ideally in a space that is familiar and safe. You bring the decision to the center of your awareness, not as a problem to be solved, but as a scenario to be felt. You hold the image of yourself on the other side of the commitment. You hold the image of the offer, the person, the contract, the opportunity, fully accepted, fully activated. You hold it for long enough that the body has time to respond without being rushed. Then you observe, not with the mind's interpretation running immediately, with patient observation. You note the response in the chest, in the throat, in the stomach, in the quality of the breath. You note whether the image feels open or constricted. You note whether the imagined scene feels inhabited or cold. You are not looking for certainty. You are reading the report of the second field in its most direct language. The fourth step is the hidden question. This is the question the protocol asks you to pose directly to the inner system after the body check. The question is, what am I not seeing yet? Not what do I fear? Not what could go wrong? But what am I not seeing yet? This question has a different quality from worry-based questioning because it is oriented toward investigation rather than protection. It invites the inner system to surface not its fears, but its unfinished observations. The information that is present but has not yet been fully formed into conscious awareness. Sit with the question without rushing to answer it. The answer may arrive immediately. It may arrive during the night. It may arrive in the form of a memory of a specific conversation that now looks different. It may arrive as a question you suddenly realize you have not asked the other party. In whatever form it arrives, note it. Write it down if that is useful. Do not dismiss it because it seems small or because the rational mind immediately provides a reassuring counter-argument. The fifth step is the single clean confirmation request. This is not a request for a cosmic sign. It is a specific, reasonable, practical request for one piece of information or one observable event that would confirm the alignment of the decision with the reality you are examining. The confirmation must be specific. It must be observable. It must be independent of your own wishful interpretation. For example, if this partnership is genuinely aligned, the conversation I request about exit terms will be engaged with openly and completely. For example, if this role is genuinely as described, One reference will voluntarily mention the specific quality I've been unable to confirm through official channels. The single clean confirmation request is a precision tool. It prevents the distortion of seeking so many signs that you can always find one that supports the conclusion you prefer. One clean confirmation request. One observable test. The result of that test is data. The sixth step is the timing examination. This is when you look specifically at the relationship between the decision and the current state of your life circumstances, your emotional availability, your practical readiness, and the actual operational conditions of the opportunity itself. A decision that is genuinely right for you can still be wrong in its timing. The protocol asks you to examine what would have to be true for this timing to be correct, and then to look honestly at whether those conditions are actually present. Timing signals appear in the friction field. If executing this decision right now would require you to ignore several significant practical obstacles that are themselves trying to communicate something, the timing examination makes those obstacles visible as information rather than treating them as inconveniences to be powered through. What is the specific obstruction telling you about readiness? Is the obstruction a growth demand? Is it a warning about the current state of the opportunity itself? Or is it practical preparation that must be completed before the commitment can be made fully? The seventh step is the smallest honest move. This is the protocol's conclusion, and it is perhaps its most important contribution to the entire field of discernment-based decision-making. After the pause, after the noise removal, after the body check, after the hidden question, after the single clean confirmation, after the timing examination, you are not asked to achieve perfect certainty. You are asked to make the smallest honest move that is available to you. The smallest honest move is the minimum action that honors what you have learned through the protocol without requiring you to commit to more than the current state of your clarity supports. If the protocol has revealed that two specific questions need answers before you can proceed, the smallest honest move is to ask those two questions and to wait for the answers before committing. If the protocol has revealed that you need one more conversation with one specific person, that conversation is the smallest honest move, not the signing. If the protocol has confirmed the alignment and cleared the warning, then the smallest honest move is the commitment itself, made from full awareness rather than from pressure. The smallest honest move principle prevents two common errors in discernment practice. It prevents the error of spiritual paralysis, in which someone uses the protocol as a framework for indefinite deferral of any decision. And it prevents the error of premature commitment, in which someone completes the protocol's early steps and then leaps past the remaining steps because momentum has built. The smallest honest move is always precisely calibrated to the actual current state of inner and outer clarity. It does not demand more than what is known. It does not permit less than what is clear. The protocol as a whole can be understood through the image of the black candle itself. The pause is the act of lighting the candle in a still room. The removal of noise is the act of closing the windows so the flame can reveal its true direction without being bent by external wind. The body check is the first reading of the flame. The hidden question is the request to see more clearly than you can currently see. The single clean confirmation is the test of whether the flame confirms the direction. The timing examination is the reading of the quality of the light, whether it is strong enough to illuminate the full distance of the path. And the smallest honest move is the step you take by the light of what the flame has revealed, not by the light of what you wish it had revealed. This sequence is not performed once in a lifetime. It is a repeating practice. Every significant decision deserves this cycle, and the more you practice it, the faster and more naturally it operates. What begins as a structured sequence of deliberate steps eventually becomes an integrated way of approaching any consequential choice. The protocol does not disappear. It becomes so woven into your awareness that you begin to perform it instinctively, the way an experienced reader runs their eyes across a page without consciously decoding each letter. There is one more element of the protocol that must be addressed before this chamber closes: the element of record. The Black Candle Protocol is most powerful when it is accompanied by a written record, not an elaborate journal, a simple notation, decision considered, body check result, hidden question surfaced, confirmation requested, confirmation received or not received, smallest honest move taken. And then, in the weeks and months that follow, a simple note on what unfolded. This record does two things. It builds the empirical database of your own discernment system's accuracy over time, and it reveals the specific categories of decision in which your warning system is most reliable, and the specific categories in which it is most likely to generate distortion. Over time, this record becomes one of the most valuable archives you can maintain. It is the record of your own inner intelligence, learning to report with increasing precision. The black candle burns in every room where a major decision is being formed. The protocol is the practice of learning to read the flame before you sign your path forward. The protocol is powerful precisely because it asks something that modern culture makes very difficult: genuine stillness in the presence of a pending decision. And because it asks something difficult, it is susceptible to specific categories of misuse, avoidance, and distortion. This chamber maps those mistakes so that the protocol remains a tool of discernment rather than becoming a tool of delay, control, fantasy, or the spiritual validation of poor preparation. The first mistake is rushing the pause. The pause is the foundational step of the entire protocol, and it is the step most frequently compromised. The pause is corrupted when it becomes a brief delay rather than a genuine period of inner consultation. When someone says they will sleep on it and then spends the night discussing it with 3 different people, constructing their decision through external conversation rather than through inner stillness, they have not paused, they have redirected. The pause must involve actual silence and actual stillness, not a brief intermission before the next round of deliberation. The second mistake is consulting biased advisors and treating their input as the single clean confirmation. Every person you consult about a major decision brings their own beliefs, their own history, their own relationship with risk and stability, their own investment in who you are or who they need you to be. The person who loves you and is afraid of seeing you take risks will generate warnings that are calibrated to their fear, not to your situation. The person who is invested in the opportunity, who stands to benefit from your decision, will generate reassurances that are calibrated to their interest, not to your actual alignment. Biased advisors are not without value, but their input must be identified as filtered information rather than treated as objective confirmation. The third mistake is ignoring legal, financial, or practical reality in the name of spiritual alignment. The protocol is a discernment framework, not a replacement for competent professional advice in areas where expertise is required. A contract that contains a clause you do not understand requires a qualified legal reader, not just a body check. An investment that you cannot afford to lose requires sober financial evaluation, not just a sense of spiritual readiness. A health decision requires medical consultation alongside whatever inner guidance you are receiving. The protocol operates in the space between the visible facts, and it supplements but never replaces the gathering of those facts through appropriate expert channels. The fourth mistake is spiritualizing negligence. This is when someone uses the language of the protocol or the language of spiritual discernment to avoid doing the practical work that a decision requires. They say they are waiting for the universe to confirm the timing while never actually requesting the specific piece of information that would confirm readiness. They say they are feeling into the decision while never asking the questions that would clarify the actual terms. They use the framework of inner wisdom as a socially acceptable reason for avoiding the discomfort of direct inquiry, difficult conversations, or the honest assessment of their own level of preparation. This is not the protocol. This is the protocol's language used in service of avoidance. The fifth mistake is waiting for impossible certainty. The protocol does not promise certainty. The protocol promises a more complete decision, and a more complete decision still contains uncertainty, because uncertainty is the inherent condition of any decision that involves the future. If you are using the protocol as a mechanism for postponing commitment until certainty arrives, you are waiting for something that will never come. At a certain point, when the body has reported, when the hidden question has been answered, when the clean confirmation has been received, when the timing has been examined and found acceptable, and when the smallest honest move is clear, the protocol is complete. What remains after that completion is not more information. It is the willingness to act by the light of the candle that has been lit. The sixth mistake is using the protocol to avoid necessary confrontation. Sometimes the hidden warning is pointing specifically toward a conversation that needs to happen before the decision can be made cleanly. The conversation about the clause that was described verbally but written differently. The conversation about the exit terms. The conversation about what happens if the arrangement does not deliver what it has promised. These conversations are uncomfortable. They carry the risk of disrupting an atmosphere that has been pleasant, and so the protocol can be used to defer them indefinitely, framing the deferral as continued discernment rather than as the avoidance of a necessary but difficult exchange. The seventh mistake is performing the protocol externally while bypassing the actual internal steps. This is when someone goes through the motions, takes a pause, appears to be in stillness, describes themselves as feeling into the decision, asks the question publicly, but has already decided and is using the protocol as a framework for legitimizing a choice that was made before the process began. This is perhaps the most subtle form of protocol corruption because it looks like discernment from the outside. The tell is that the result of every step confirms the pre-made decision. When every body check, every hidden question, and every confirmation request all point to the same conclusion without any nuance, variation, or friction, the process has not been engaged honestly. The eighth mistake is applying the protocol selectively, using it only when you feel uncertain but overriding it when you feel certain. The protocol is not only for moments of doubt, it is especially necessary for moments of excitement, because excitement is one of the most reliable warning silencing states. The decisions that feel certain before the protocol has been run are frequently the decisions that most need it. Certainty that precedes examination is not discernment, it is momentum. And momentum, as has been established, can carry a person past a warning without ever registering that the warning was present. The ninth mistake is confusing the protocol with a set of ritual behaviors rather than a set of inner activities. The protocol is not about creating a particular atmosphere, using particular objects, or performing particular actions. The candle in this codex is a metaphor. The library is a metaphor. The archive is a metaphor. What the protocol asks of you is entirely internal, genuine stillness, honest body examination, direct questioning of the inner system, a specific and observable confirmation request, a sober timing assessment, and the courage to make the smallest move that your actual clarity supports. These are inner activities. They do not require a particular setting to be performed with full integrity. The 10th mistake is applying the protocol and then disregarding its findings when they contradict what you want. This is the most fundamental form of protocol failure. The process was run. The body check revealed contraction. The hidden question surfaced a specific concern that was not addressed. The confirmation was not clearly received. The timing examination revealed significant friction. The smallest honest move pointed toward a pause and further investigation. And the person proceeds to sign anyway, because the want was stronger than the discernment. This mistake does not make the protocol worthless, it makes it honest in its report. The cost of disregarding the report is still the cost the situation carries, regardless of whether the report was received. The protocol was introduced in the context of decisions where something feels wrong or uncertain. But the advanced territory of the Black Candle Protocol is the territory where the standard warning signals are not clearly present, where both options appear good, where both options appear frightening, or where one option appears socially correct but is spiritually hollow. This chamber addresses each of those categories. The category of decisions where both options look genuinely good is one of the most disorienting forms of major decision because the absence of obvious warning removes the most familiar signal. When there is no clear flag, no persistent friction, no uneasy silence, no specific omission, the protocol must operate differently. In this category, the body check is performed not to detect a warning, but to detect a degree of aliveness. Both options are held in the body individually, not simultaneously. The question is not which one produces less discomfort. The question is which one, when held vividly in the body's imagination, produces a quality of expansion that the other does not. This expansion is subtle. It is not excitement. Excitement can be generated by novelty and does not reliably distinguish alignment from stimulation. The expansion that indicates genuine alignment has a quality of coming home to something rather than arriving somewhere new. It has a quality of recognition rather than anticipation. It feels like the image settling into the body rather than hovering above it. This distinction requires the kind of inner literacy that is built through consistent practice with the protocol over time. The category of decisions where both options appear frightening is equally common and equally disorienting. Fear activates the same threat response physiology regardless of whether the threat is genuine or imagined. When both available paths generate fear, the protocol must be used to examine the specific character of each fear, not simply its intensity. Fear that is attached to genuine warning has a specific character. It is typically focused, persistent, and points toward a particular element of the situation. Fear that is attached to growth or to the responsibility of commitment has a different character. It is more diffuse, more general, and tends to be about the unknown rather than about a specific identified concern. In the both frightening category, the protocol question becomes not which option creates less fear, but which fear is pointing toward genuine warning and which fear is pointing toward the edge of your current capacity. Moving toward the edge of your current capacity while feeling afraid is often the most honest decision available to you. Moving toward a situation that is triggering a genuine warning while feeling afraid is often the most costly decision you can make. The character of the fear is the diagnostic. The protocol creates the stillness necessary to read it accurately. The category of decisions where one option is socially correct but spiritually hollow is perhaps the most important territory the advanced application addresses. This is the decision where the option that your community, your family, your professional culture, or the dominant expectation of your social field endorses does not generate the quality of inner aliveness that indicates genuine alignment. It looks right from the outside. The credentials are appropriate. The timing appears conventional. The risk profile is acceptable to those around you. But something in the body's response to imagining it fully activated is flat rather than alive, empty rather than inhabited, correct on the surface but hollow underneath. This category of decision is where the most significant life-level costs of ignored warnings are accumulated. Because the socially correct option is so strongly endorsed by the external environment that the inner signal of hollowness is consistently reclassified as insufficient gratitude or inappropriate ambition or irrational dissatisfaction. The person takes the socially correct path and the hollowness follows them into it, becomes the low-frequency companion of a life that looks right from the outside and feels wrong on the inside. The Black Candle Protocol, in its advanced application, is designed specifically to make that hollow feeling visible before the commitment is made, so that the choice is made with full awareness of what is being prioritized rather than in ignorance of the signal that the second field is sending. The advanced application also extends the protocol into the domain of relationship decisions specifically, because relationship decisions carry a category of warning signal that is distinct from professional and financial decisions. In relationships, the warning frequently appears not through the other person's character, but through the internal conditions you are bringing to the relationship itself. You may be approaching a relationship from a place of genuine readiness and spaciousness, in which case the protocol will reveal alignment where genuine alignment exists. Or you may be approaching from a place of loneliness, fear of being seen as undesirable, comparison to what others have achieved, or the belief that this specific person represents the last viable option. The protocol, in its body check step, will report on the internal conditions you are bringing rather than only on the qualities of the other person. That report is some of the most valuable information the protocol can generate in the relationship domain. The advanced application extends similarly into questions of creative and vocational identity, which are among the most complex decision territories, because they involve the intersection of practical sustainability and inner calling. The option that pays reliably but asks nothing of your deeper intelligence, and the option that draws fully on your deeper intelligence but offers no practical guarantee, is a decision structure that appears across countless lives. The protocol does not tell you which to choose, but it does reveal, through the body check and the hidden question, Whether the practical option is genuinely sustainable for your particular nervous system and identity, or whether it is a form of spiritual hollowness that will eventually generate its own warning at a higher cost. The final dimension of the advanced application is the retrospective use of the protocol on decisions already made, not as an exercise in regret, but as a practice of signal calibration. When you examine a past decision through the lens of the protocol and ask, honestly, what the second field was reporting at the time of that decision, you build a more accurate map of your own warning system's language. You learn which of your body signals were genuine warnings and which were distortions. You learn which categories of decision generate the most reliable inner intelligence and which generate the most noise. This retrospective practice, done without self-punishment and without the distortion of hindsight bias, is one of the most powerful calibration tools available to a developing discernment practice. The protocol is not a closed system. It is a living framework that grows more precise with every application, more nuanced with every honest examination, and more integrated with every decision you make from the fullness of both fields of awareness rather than from only one. The black candle is still burning. The two papers are still on the desk. One signed with the expectations of others, one unsigned, holding the shape of something that has not yet been given permission to exist. But you are no longer the person who entered this room without knowing how to read the flame. Everything this codex has moved through, the law beneath the event, the forces that silence the warning, the map of how warnings appear, the mirror of what ignored warnings reveal, the grammar of false signals, the protocol in full, the advanced terrain of decisions where both options are frightening or both look good or one is hollow in the center. All of it has been preparation for this single moment. The moment you sit at the desk and before you sign, you pause. You close the windows of urgency and social pressure. You bring the decision into the still room of your body's honest response. You ask what has not yet been seen. You request one clean, observable confirmation. You examine the timing without fear and without false optimism. And then you make the smallest move that your actual clarity supports. The flame of the black candle bends not toward what is correct in the eyes of the world. It bends toward what the deeper intelligence, the accumulated archive of your lived experience, the pattern recognition of your nervous system, the second field of evidence that has been reporting all along, perceives as aligned with the actual conditions of your life and the genuine direction of your becoming. That is all it has ever been pointing toward, not a mystical destination, a genuine direction. You will face decisions again after this, decisions that carry urgency, decisions that arrive with flattery, decisions that are wrapped in the relief of finally after years of waiting, decisions where the people you love are already celebrating the choice before you have made it. Decisions where both options look like versions of the same necessary unknown. In all of those moments, the black candle is available to you. The protocol is available. The second field is always broadcasting. The only question is whether the room of your awareness is quiet enough to receive its report before you put your name to the paper. If this codex found you at the right time, if something in these chambers resonated with a knowing you have already carried, keep it close. Return to it when the decisions become difficult to read. Return to it when the urgency is high and the stillness feels impossible. Return to it when someone you trust sees no warning and you feel one that you cannot yet name. The archive holds its place. The flame holds its direction. The door to the third library does not close. It waits.